My 22-year-old sister tore my $500 birthday dress into pieces because she was overwhelmed. My mother looked at the ruined dress, looked at me crying and snapped, "Don't overreact." But have you ever had someone hurt you so badly that the worst part wasn't what they did? It was realizing the people who were supposed to defend you expected you to forgive them instead? I remember standing there with pieces of that dress in my hands, listening to my sister explain why she couldn't control herself. My mother kept telling me that Madison was emotional, that I needed to be the bigger person, that it was only a dress. So I nodded. I didn't argue. I didn't demand an apology. I simply said, "Okay." And that was the moment my family made one mistake. They thought my silence meant I had forgiven Madison. They had no idea I was finally done paying the price for everyone else's behavior. For a few seconds after I said, "Okay," nobody moved. My mother seemed relieved. Madison lowered her eyes, and I could almost feel the tension leaving the room. To them, the problem was solved. I had stopped crying. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't demanding money or an apology. But I hadn't forgiven anyone. I was trying to understand how I had become the person everyone expected to hurt quietly. Because this wasn't new. Madison had been my younger sister for 22 years, and for most of those years, I had been the one people called when something went wrong. If Madison missed a payment, I helped. If she forgot an appointment, I reminded her. If she made a mistake, my mother would explain that she was young, emotional, or overwhelmed. And somehow I was always expected to understand. I was 6 years older, so I was supposed to know better. That was the phrase my mother used whenever Madison crossed a line. "You're older, Allison. You should understand." When Madison was 16, she broke my laptop after borrowing it without asking. She cried so hard that my mother spent 20 minutes comforting her. I remember standing in the doorway holding the broken charger in my hand, while my mother told me that Madison hadn't meant to damage it. I ended up paying for the repair. When Madison was 18, she borrowed my car and returned it with a dent in the passenger door. She said she had been distracted and didn't notice the damage until she got home. My mother told me not to make it into a big issue. I paid for that repair too. And when Madison was 20, she missed a payment on her car insurance and called me crying because she was afraid her policy would be canceled. I transferred the money. I didn't think much about any of it at the time. That's the dangerous thing about becoming the responsible one in a family. You don't notice the pattern while you're living inside it. You just keep solving one small problem after another until everyone forgets that you were never supposed to be responsible for them in the first place. By the time I turned 26, I had become very good at swallowing my disappointment. I could hear the warning signs in my mother's voice. I knew when an argument wasn't worth having. I knew when Madison was about to cry. And I knew exactly how long I needed to stay quiet before everyone felt comfortable again. But that birthday was different. That dress had been different. I hadn't bought it because I wanted to impress anyone. I bought it because, for once, I wanted something that belonged completely to me. I had saved for it. I had stood in the fitting room looking at myself and thinking that maybe I deserved one evening where I wasn't someone's daughter, someone's older sister, someone's emergency contact, or the person expected to fix whatever Madison had broken. Just Allison. And then Madison took the scissors to it. What she didn't know was that when I walked upstairs that night and closed my bedroom door, I didn't spend the evening thinking about how to make her apologize. I opened my laptop. I opened my bank account. And for the first time in years, I started looking at exactly how much helping my family had actually cost me. I expected the number to make me angry. Instead, it made me quiet. I sat at the edge of my bed with my laptop open, scrolling through transactions I hadn't thought about in years. At first, they looked ordinary. A phone bill here. An insurance payment there. A transfer to Madison because she was short this month. But when I started going backward, I saw something I had never allowed myself to see before. There was a pattern. I had been calling it helping. My family had been calling it normal. And apparently those were two very different things. I pulled up the oldest records I could find. Madison's phone bill. Then her car insurance. Then a repair I'd completely forgotten about. Then a few $100s I'd sent her after she said her paycheck had been delayed. I stared at each transaction, trying to remember the conversations behind them. Almost every payment had come with the same explanation. Just this once. That phrase suddenly looked ridiculous. Because there had been so many just this once moments that they had quietly become a permanent arrangement. I opened a blank document and started making a list. I didn't even know why at first. Maybe I needed to see it outside my head. Maybe I needed proof that I wasn't imagining things. Or maybe, after years of being told I was overreacting, I needed numbers because numbers couldn't be accused of being emotional. I added everything I could verify. The total kept climbing. By the time I reached the previous year, I was already staring at several $1,000s. Then I found older payments. More repairs. More transfers. More bills. I kept scrolling. My stomach tightened. It wasn't the amount itself that shocked me. It was how casually everyone had expected me to provide it. Nobody had ever sat down and said, "Allison, can you afford this?" Nobody had asked whether helping Madison was affecting my savings. They simply knew I usually said yes. And once people learn that you rarely say no, they stop hearing your yes as a choice. They start hearing it as an obligation. I leaned back against my headboard and looked toward the dress hanging on the back of my bedroom door. Or what was left of it. The fabric was torn in several places, the delicate stitching completely destroyed. I had been staring at that dress for hours, but suddenly I wasn't seeing a birthday dress anymore. I was seeing every little thing I had sacrificed because I thought keeping peace was the same as keeping a family together. I kept working through the records. Then I noticed something that made me stop. There were payments I couldn't remember making. Not because they were fraudulent, because I had forgotten what they were for. I opened the descriptions. One was for a utility bill. Another was for a credit card payment. Then I found a transfer from almost 8 months earlier. $1,800. The note simply said, "Madison, emergency." I stared at it. I remembered sending the money. What I didn't remember was ever getting it back. And when I searched my messages for the word repay, I found nothing. That was when I realized something uncomfortable. I hadn't just been helping Madison when she needed me. I had become part of the system that allowed her to never learn how to stand on her own. And somehow I had been helping that system because saying no felt more painful than saying yes. I closed my laptop. For the first time since the dress was torn, I wasn't thinking about what Madison had done. I was thinking about what I had allowed. And the next morning I was going to find out just how far that arrangement had actually gone. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual. For a few seconds I forgot about the dress. Then I saw it hanging on the chair beside my bed, torn and misshapen, and everything from the night before came back at once. But instead of crying, I opened my laptop again. I wanted to know exactly what I had been paying for. Not what I remembered. Not what my mother told me I had helped with. The actual numbers. I made 3 columns. What I paid, who benefited, and whether I had ever been repaid. By 9 in the morning the list was longer than I expected. Madison's phone. Her insurance. 2 car repairs. Several grocery transfers. A medical bill. A credit card payment. And dozens of smaller transfers that individually didn't look important. $20. $50. $100. $200. The kind of amounts you barely notice when someone you love says they need help. But when I added them together they became something I couldn't ignore. I was sitting there staring at the total when my mother knocked on my bedroom door. "Allison." I closed the laptop. "Come in." Diane stepped inside carrying a cup of coffee. She looked completely normal. That almost bothered me more than anything. She wasn't angry. She wasn't apologetic. She wasn't uncomfortable. She looked like yesterday had been an unfortunate family disagreement that everyone was supposed to move past. "I wanted to check on you," she said. I nodded. "I'm fine." She looked at the chair where the ruined dress was still sitting. "I really wish you wouldn't keep looking at that." I almost laughed. "Why?" "Because it isn't helping." I looked at her for a moment. Neither was destroying it. Her expression tightened. "Madison already feels terrible." I waited. Then I asked, "Has she apologized?" Diane hesitated. She was overwhelmed. That wasn't my question. She said she was sorry. Did she say it to me? Diane sighed. "Allison, why are you doing this?" There was. Not why did Madison do it. Not how can we fix this. Why was I doing this? I looked down at my hands. I bought that dress with my own money. I know. I saved for it. I know. And Madison destroyed it. Diane nodded reluctantly. But she was overwhelmed. I felt something inside me settle. Not anger. Clarity. I opened my laptop again and turned the screen toward her. "Do you know how much money I've given Madison over the years?" Diane glanced at the screen. I don't know. I didn't either. He looked at the total. Her face changed slightly. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to notice. You've been keeping track? No. I just started. Diane stared at the number. That can't be right. It came directly from my bank statements. She looked at me. Allison, you can't hold everything you've ever done for your sister over her head. I'm not. Then why are you counting it? I thought about the ruined dress. Then I looked back at my mother. Because I finally need to know the difference between helping my family and being responsible for my family. She didn't answer. And for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to fill the silence. A few seconds later, she stood up. You're making this much bigger than it needs to be. Maybe she believed that. Maybe she had always believed that. But after she left my room, I opened the spreadsheet again. And underneath the total, I typed one sentence. No more automatic yes. I didn't know it yet, but that decision was about to change much more than Madison's birthday dress. The words sat there on the screen for a long time. No more automatic yes. I read them again, then closed the laptop. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel victorious. Honestly, I felt guilty. That was the part nobody ever talked about when you finally set a boundary with people who were used to having access to you. You don't immediately feel free. Sometimes you feel like you've done something wrong. For the rest of that day, I kept waiting for Madison to come into my room and apologize. He didn't. Instead, around noon, I heard her laughing downstairs with my mother. That sound bothered me more than I expected. Not because I wanted her to suffer. I just couldn't understand how she could laugh normally after destroying something that had mattered so much to me. I went downstairs. Madison was sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone while Mom prepared lunch. She glanced at me. Hey. Just that. Hey. No apology. No explanation. Nothing. I looked at my mother. Did she want to talk to me? Madison frowned. About what? I actually thought she was joking. The dress. Her face immediately changed. Oh, Allison. Seriously. I felt my jaw tighten. What? I already said I was sorry. When? Last night. You said you were overwhelmed. That was me explaining what happened. Madison put her phone down. What do you want me to do? Cry? My mother immediately stepped in. That's enough, both of you. I looked at her. I wasn't yelling. You're making her feel attacked. I almost smiled at the absurdity of it. She tore my dress. She knows. Then why am I the one being told to stop? Nobody answered. Madison picked up her phone again. That was when I understood something. She wasn't waiting to apologize. She was waiting for me to get tired. Because that's what usually happened. I would become uncomfortable. Mom would tell me I was making things worse. Madison would become emotional. And eventually I would say the words everyone wanted to hear. It's okay. So I decided not to say them. I went back upstairs. That evening, Madison texted me. Can you send me $240? My insurance payment is due tomorrow. I stared at the message. There was the old pattern. One problem. One request. One automatic yes. My thumb hovered over the banking app. I could have transferred the money in less than 30 seconds. Instead, I typed, "No, I can't cover that this month." I stared at the message before sending it. My heart was beating faster than it should have. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. What? I didn't answer. Another message came. Mom said you would help me. I read that sentence twice. Not can you help me? Not would you mind helping? Mom said you would. That was when something finally clicked. This wasn't only about Madison asking me for money. My family had started making promises using my money. I put my phone face down. A few minutes later, Mom called. I answered. Did you tell Madison I wasn't paying her insurance? Yes. Why? Because she said you were going to. There was a pause. Then she said something that I would remember for a long time. Allison, don't punish your sister because you're upset about the dress. I closed my eyes. I'm not punishing her. Then send the money. No. You can afford it. That doesn't mean I have to pay it. Mom's voice became colder. She needs you. I looked across my room at the torn birthday dress. For years, those 4 words would have ended the conversation. He needs you. But this time I asked a question. What happens if I don't? Mom didn't answer immediately. And that silence told me more than her words ever could. Because the truth was simple. They had never planned for Madison to handle everything herself. They had planned for me to keep handling it. I took a breath. Mom, I'm not discussing money anymore tonight. You're being selfish. Maybe. I ended the call. Then I sat quietly on my bed. For the first time I realized something important. Saying no hadn't destroyed my family. It had only revealed how much of the family depended on me never saying it. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying my mother's words. She needs you. I had heard some version of that sentence my entire life. Whenever Madison made a mistake, she needed me. Whenever she ran short of money, she needed me. Whenever she was upset, she needed me. And somehow, needing me had always meant I was supposed to give something up. The next morning I made coffee and opened my laptop again. I wasn't looking for another argument. I wanted facts. So I went through every recurring payment connected to Madison. The phone bill, insurance, car registration, streaming services she had asked me to put on my account years ago. Then I found something I had completely forgotten. A $1,200 payment for a credit card balance. I remembered that one. Madison had called me crying 3 years earlier. She said she had made a few bad purchases and didn't know how she was going to catch up. I had paid it because I was afraid she would ruin her credit. Then there was another payment. $850. Then $600. Then $300. I opened my old messages. Almost every request had the same language. Just until next month. I promise I'll pay you back. I really need help this time. I searched for the word repay. There were promises. There were thank yous. There were heart emojis. But there were almost no actual repayments. I leaned back in my chair. How had I missed this? Then I did something I had never done before. I calculated everything. Not just Madison's bills. Everything I had spent because someone in my family had decided that I could handle it. The number was far higher than I expected. It wasn't hundreds. It wasn't even a few thousand. Over the years, it had reached more than $18,000. I stared at the total. $18,000. Money I could have saved. Money I could have invested. Money I could have used for my own plans. And suddenly the $500 dress didn't feel like an isolated incident anymore. The dress represented something much larger. My sister had destroyed something I had bought for myself, and my mother had immediately expected me to absorb the loss. That was exactly what had happened with my money for years. Madison took. I covered. Mom explained. I forgave. Then everyone moved on. I closed the spreadsheet and went downstairs. Madison was sitting at the table eating breakfast. She looked at me. Did you change your mind about the insurance? No. She sighed. You're really doing this? I'm really doing what? Making me handle everything myself. I looked at her. That sentence should tell you something. She frowned. What? You said everything. She didn't respond. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Madison, I'm not taking anything away from you. I'm just stopping something I should have stopped years ago. She looked toward the kitchen. Mom said you were always going to help me. I nodded slowly. I know. That was the moment I realized how deep this went. Madison hadn't invented the expectation by herself. My family had built it around me. And if I wanted it to end, I couldn't simply ask them to understand. I had to change what I was willing to do. So I opened my phone. I canceled the remaining automatic payments I had been covering for Madison. One by one. No announcement. No dramatic speech. Just quiet decisions. And for the first time I wasn't wondering whether my family would be angry. I was wondering something much more important. What would my life look like if I stopped being everyone's safety net? I didn't have to wait long to find out. By the following week my life already felt different. Not easier exactly. Just quieter. There were fewer calls asking me to fix something. Fewer messages beginning with, "Can you please just," fewer little emergencies that somehow always became my responsibility. But Madison wasn't adjusting nearly as quietly as I was. 3 days after I canceled the payments, she came into my room without knocking. She had her phone in her hand. You canceled everything? I looked up from my laptop. I told you I wasn't paying those bills anymore. You didn't say you were canceling them all. I thought that was clear. She stared at me. You know I can't afford all of this. I know. So what am I supposed to do? For once, I didn't answer immediately, because I realized something. That question wasn't really being asked of me. It was being asked because, for years, I had always provided the answer. I closed my laptop. You need to figure that out. Her face hardened. Wow. I didn't react. She walked out. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. That evening, my mother called me downstairs. Robert was sitting at the dining table with her. The moment I walked in, I knew this wasn't a casual conversation. Mom folded her hands. We need to talk about Madison's future. I almost laughed. Her future. Not her insurance. Not her phone bill. Not the dress. Her future. I sat down. What about it? Mom exchanged a glance with Robert. Madison has been looking at apartments. Okay. She found one she really likes. Good for her. It requires a substantial down payment. I waited. Mom looked directly at me. And we were hoping you could help. There was. So simple. So casual. As if she were asking me to bring dessert to Thanksgiving. How much? About $20,000. I actually thought I had heard her wrong. $20,000? It's an investment, Mom said quickly. She'll be building equity instead of throwing money away on rent. I looked at Robert. He wasn't looking at me. Why are you discussing this with me? Mom frowned. Because you're in a position to help her. Did Madison ask you to ask me? She was uncomfortable asking herself. I leaned back in my chair. That sentence almost made me smile. Uncomfortable asking herself. After everything I had just discovered, I suddenly understood the entire system. Madison didn't need to ask because everyone already knew I was expected to say yes. I looked at my mother. Does Madison have the income to afford this apartment? Mom hesitated. Not comfortably. Then she can't afford it. She can if you help with the down payment. No. Mom's expression changed immediately. Allison. No. This isn't about the dress. I know. Then why are you being so difficult? I looked at her for a long moment. Because nobody asked me if I wanted to spend $20,000. Robert finally looked up. Mom became defensive. We're family. I know. And family helps each other. I agree. She seemed relieved for half a second. Then I finished. But helping someone is a choice. It isn't something they get to decide on my behalf. Nobody spoke. I stood up and walked back to my room. But before I reached the stairs, I heard Robert quietly ask my mother. Did you really think she'd pay $20,000? I stopped for half a second. Then I kept walking. Because that question told me something I hadn't understood before. My father was finally starting to realize that the family had been planning Madison's future with money that was never theirs to promise. And I had a feeling this was only the beginning. For the first time, my father's question stayed with me. Did you really think she'd pay $20,000? I didn't know what Robert expected Mom to say. I didn't wait around to find out. I went upstairs, closed my bedroom door and sat at my desk. $20,000. That number kept circling through my head. Not because I couldn't afford it. But as I could. And that was exactly what made it dangerous. Being financially capable of helping someone doesn't mean you owe them the help. I opened my banking app and looked at my savings. For years, I had been proud of having enough money set aside to handle an emergency. But now I realized that a large part of that security came from constantly saying no to myself while saying yes to everyone else. I had postponed vacations. Delayed replacing things I actually needed. Talked myself out of purchases because Madison might need help next month. And while I was doing that, my family had apparently been planning around my savings. I opened a new account the next morning. Not because I was trying to hide money. Because I wanted a financial boundary that couldn't be confused with family generosity. I moved my personal emergency savings there, updated my passwords, removed old automatic transfers, and reviewed every account where someone else had access. Felt strange. Almost secretive. But then I reminded myself that there was nothing secret about protecting my own money. That afternoon Madison called. I almost didn't answer. But I did. What? There was silence for a moment. Then she said, Mom told me you said no. I did. You're really not going to help me? No. She breathed out sharply. You know how much this apartment means to me. I understand. You could afford the down payment. I could. Then why won't you? I looked around my room. At the dress. At the spreadsheet still open on my desk. At the life I had spent years putting second. Because I don't want to. She went quiet. I knew that answer would upset her. But I also knew it was the first completely honest answer I'd ever given her about money. You've changed, she said. I hope so. That isn't a compliment. I know. She ended the call. I expected guilt. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Relief. A few days later, Madison found another apartment. Smaller. Less expensive. Something she could actually manage herself. I didn't celebrate that. I didn't want her to struggle just to prove a point. I wanted her to become responsible for her own choices. But my mother wasn't ready to let go. She came to my house one Saturday afternoon carrying a garment bag. I knew immediately what was inside. She unzipped it. A dress. Not the same one. A replacement. I bought this for you, she said. I stared at it. It was expensive. I didn't touch it. Why? Because I know you're still upset about your birthday. I looked at her. Mom, I don't need another dress. She frowned. I thought you'd appreciate the gesture. I shook my head. You're still thinking the dress is the problem. She didn't answer. I stepped closer. The dress was damaged. That's replaceable. Then what is this about? I took a breath. It's about the fact that every time Madison hurts me, you ask me to understand her instead of asking her to understand what she did to me. My mother's face softened for the first time. But I wasn't finished. And I'm not doing that anymore. She slowly zipped the garment bag closed. Neither of us apologized. Neither of us hugged. But when she left, I realized something important. I wasn't trying to punish my family anymore. I was simply refusing to participate in the old arrangement. And that was much harder for them to fight. For the next few weeks, I expected things to get worse. In some ways they did. My mother stopped calling as often. When she did call, her voice was careful, almost formal. She no longer asked me directly for money, but I could hear the disappointment underneath ordinary questions. How's work? Fine. Are you eating? Yes. Everything okay? Yes, Mom. We had conversations that sounded normal but felt completely different. Madison was quieter too. She had moved into a smaller apartment and for the first time she was paying her own bills. I didn't know whether she was angry with me or embarrassed. Maybe both. Then one Friday evening she came to my house. I almost didn't recognize the look on her face. She wasn't dressed for a party. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She looked tired. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She walked into the living room and sat down. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she said, I hate you right now. I wasn't expecting that. I sat across from her. Okay. He gave me a frustrated look. That's it. What do you want me to say? I don't know. She looked down at her hands. I've been angry at you for weeks. I know. You don't even ask how I'm doing. I didn't think you wanted me to. She shook her head. I didn't know what I wanted. That sounded more honest than anything she had said since my birthday. She told me the apartment was harder than she expected. He had to work more hours. She had started cooking instead of ordering food. She was finally looking at her bank account before buying things. Then she said something that surprised me. I didn't realize how much you were doing. I didn't answer. She continued. I thought you just liked helping. That sentence stayed between us. I could have listed everything I had paid for. I could have reminded her about the $18,000. I could have told her about the dress. Said I asked one question. Why did you tear it? Her eyes dropped. I was angry. At me. Yes. Why? He swallowed. Because everyone was paying attention to you. I waited. She admitted that she had been feeling jealous during the birthday celebration. Every compliment Allison received had made her feel smaller. Then she looked at me. And I knew Mom would defend me. That hurt more than I expected. Not because she had been jealous. Because she had known there would be no real consequence. I asked quietly, so you knew you could do it? No. She shook her head. I didn't plan it. But somewhere in my head, I knew you'd be the one everyone expected to forgive me. I looked away. That was the truth I had needed to hear. For years, I had thought Madison simply didn't understand how much her actions affected me. But she did understand one thing. She understood that I would eventually absorb the damage. He started crying. I'm sorry, Allison. This time it sounded different. There was no explanation afterward. No, but I was overwhelmed. No excuse. Just an apology. I told her I accepted it. But I also told her something she didn't want to hear. Accepting your apology doesn't mean I'm going back to the way things were. She nodded slowly. I know. And for the first time I believed she actually did. She stood up to leave, then stopped at the door. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you still hate me? I looked at my little sister. No. She waited. I just don't trust you the way I used to. She nodded. I understand. After she left, I stood by the window for a long time. The family I had known wasn't disappearing. It was changing. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what would happen if I stopped holding it together. I thought Madison's apology would make everything easier. It didn't. It made things more honest. For the first time I could separate two things I had always mixed together. Loving my sister and rescuing my sister. I could love her without paying her bills. I could forgive her without pretending what she did was acceptable. And I could care about her without becoming responsible for every consequence of her decisions. But my mother hadn't reached that point yet. About a week after Madison came to see me, Diane showed up at my house again. This time she didn't bring anything. She stood on my porch with her arms folded, looking more tired than angry. Can we talk? I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table where, for years, so many family decisions had somehow ended with me agreeing to help. She looked at me. Madison told me she apologized. She did. She said you're still not helping her financially. I'm not. Mom sighed. I don't understand how you can watch your sister struggle. I looked at her. Do you know what I don't understand? What? Why you keep calling her consequences a struggle? She frowned. Because they are. Then why did you never call them consequences when I was paying for them? She didn't answer. I opened the folder I had prepared. Inside were printed bank statements and the spreadsheet I'd made. I placed them on the table. I didn't make this to embarrass anyone. Mom looked down. I made it because I needed to understand what happened to my money. She slowly turned the first page. Phone bills. Difference. Repairs. Credit cards. Emergency transfers. Then the total. $18,000 plus. Her eyes stopped moving. Allison. I know some of these payments were my choice. She looked up. And I don't regret helping when someone genuinely needed help. Then what's the problem? The problem is that help became expected. I pointed toward the papers. Do you know how many times I was asked whether I could afford it? Mom was silent. 0. She looked uncomfortable. I thought you were happy to help. I was happy to help sometimes. I wasn't happy being treated like Madison's backup bank account. Mom leaned back. She is your sister. I know. And if something happens to her, she can ask me. You'll still help. I thought about it. If it's a real emergency and I choose to help, yes. Mom stared at me. But that's different. How? Because now it will be my decision. That sentence seemed to land harder than anything else I had said. For a moment she looked almost sad. Then she asked, Are you really willing to let this change our family? I shook my head. I didn't change it. She looked at me. I just stopped pretending it was healthy. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then Mom reached for the papers again. She studied them quietly. Finally, she said, I didn't realize it had become this much. I don't think anyone did. That was the first time she sounded less defensive. Not apologetic. Not completely understanding. But honest. Before she left, she paused at the door. Do you still love us? The question caught me off guard. I looked at her. Yes. She nodded. And you're still not changing your mind? I smiled sadly. No. She walked away. I closed the door and stood there for a moment. I realized something then. Setting a boundary hadn't made me love my family less. It had simply forced everyone to understand that love and unlimited access were never the same thing. For the first time, I thought the conversation with Mom might actually change something. Not immediately. Not dramatically. But enough that I allowed myself to hope. Then 2 weeks later I received a letter. It wasn't from Madison. It wasn't from Mom. It was from the credit card company. I opened it at my kitchen counter, expecting some routine notice. Instead, I saw a name I recognized. Madison. I read the page twice. There was an outstanding balance connected to an account I had helped her open years earlier. I thought I had removed myself from it. Apparently I hadn't. My stomach tightened. I called the number listed on the letter. After several transfers, a representative finally explained what had happened. Madison had missed 2 payments. Because my name was still attached to the account, the problem could eventually affect me. I sat there in silence. This was exactly what I had been afraid of. I called Madison. She answered quickly. Hi. Did you miss 2 payments on the card? Silence. How did you know? I got a notice. Oh. That single word told me everything. Madison, my name is still attached to this account. I know. I stared at the wall. You knew. I was going to tell you. When? I don't know. I closed my eyes. Madison, this isn't about money anymore. This could affect my credit. I'll fix it. How? I'll figure it out. I wanted to believe her. But trust isn't rebuilt because someone says they'll fix something. It's rebuilt when they actually do. So I told her, you have until Friday to bring the account current and remove my name. After that, I'm taking formal steps to protect myself. She became upset. You're threatening me? No. You sound like you're threatening me. I'm giving you a deadline. I thought you said you trusted me. I said I was trying to trust you again. That distinction made her quiet. We ended the call. For the next 3 days I heard nothing. No message. No explanation. Nothing. Friday afternoon came. Still nothing. I checked the account. The payment had not been made. That was the moment I stopped waiting for Madison to become responsible. I contacted the bank and explained the situation. I gathered every document connected to the account. Then I called an attorney. Not because I wanted to punish my sister. Because I had finally learned that protecting myself wasn't cruelty. That evening Madison called. Her voice was shaking. I need more time. I looked at the documents on my desk. I gave you 3 days. I know. I can't keep waiting. I'll pay it next week. You said that before. I swear. I was quiet. Then she started crying. Please, Allison. Don't do this. Those words took me back to the old Allison. The woman who heard someone cry and immediately looked for a way to make the problem disappear. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I spoke gently. I love you. She cried harder. But I'm not taking responsibility for this. There was a long silence. Then she whispered, You're really serious? Yes. She ended the call. I sat alone in my kitchen afterward. I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. Because boundaries have a price. Sometimes the price isn't money. Sometimes it's watching someone you love finally face a problem you used to solve for them. But the following Monday, something happened that I wasn't expecting. Madison showed up at my door. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was holding a folder. I fixed it, she said. I looked at her. What? I got another job. I borrowed a small amount from my savings. I paid the account current. He handed me the paperwork. And I removed your name. I looked through the documents carefully. Everything was there. For the first time, Madison had solved a serious problem without asking me to rescue her. She looked exhausted. Then she said something I'll never forget. I hated you for making me do it. I smiled faintly. I know. But I think I needed to. That was the moment I understood that maybe the real revenge wasn't making Madison suffer. It was refusing to keep her dependent on me. And perhaps for the first time in our lives, my sister was beginning to stand on her own. For the first time I didn't feel like I had to fix what happened next. Madison had handled the account herself. She had taken responsibility. And although I was proud of her, I knew one successful decision didn't erase years of behavior. Trust had to be rebuilt slowly. So I didn't suddenly go back to the way things were. I didn't start paying her bills again. I didn't make myself available every time she called. But I started answering her messages. We began having coffee together once every couple of weeks. Sometimes we talked about ordinary things. Work, groceries, her new apartment, my plans. And sometimes we talked about the birthday. One afternoon she asked me something I'd been avoiding. Do you still have the dress? I looked at her. No. I thought you might. I threw it away. She nodded slowly. I wish I could replace it. You can't. I know. She looked down at her coffee. That's what bothers me. What? That I can't undo it. I understood then that she was finally learning something I had spent years learning myself. Some damage can't be repaired by buying something new. Sometimes the only thing you can do is stop repeating the behavior that caused it. Then Madison surprised me. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. I've been saving. I looked at it. What is that? $500. I stared at her. You don't have to. I know. She pushed the envelope toward me. I want to pay you back for the dress. I didn't touch it. Madison, this isn't about $500. I know. She smiled sadly. That's why I'm doing it. I finally understood. She wasn't trying to buy forgiveness. She was acknowledging that what she had destroyed had value. Not just the dress. My effort. My excitement. My right to have something that belonged only to me. I took the envelope. Thank you. She nodded. Then she asked, can we go shopping? I laughed. For what? For your birthday next year. I looked at her. You're planning that far ahead? She smiled. I want to make sure I don't destroy anything. I laughed again. It was the first time we'd laughed together about the whole mess. And strangely, that moment felt more healing than any apology we'd exchanged. But there was still one person who hadn't fully accepted the change. She had stopped asking me for money. But she hadn't stopped trying to bring the old Allison back. One Sunday afternoon she called while I was preparing dinner. Madison told me she paid you back. She did. I think you two are doing better. We are. That makes me happy. I smiled. Me too. Then she said, so maybe now you can help her with the car. I stopped stirring. Mom. What? You really can't help yourself, can you? She laughed nervously. I was just asking. No. Pause. Fine. But her voice changed. Allison, I just don't want you to become so independent that you stop needing your family. I turned off the stove. I don't need my family to need me. She went quiet. I need my family to respect me. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then Mom said quietly, maybe I didn't understand the difference. That was the closest thing to an apology I'd received from her. And this time I didn't demand more. I simply said, maybe we're both learning. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen thinking about how strange the whole year had become. It had started with a birthday dress. $500. One impulsive act. One sentence from my mother. Don't overreact. But the real problem had never been the dress. The dress had simply been the first thing I refused to quietly absorb. And once I stopped absorbing one thing, I started seeing everything else. The money. The expectations. The guilt. The excuses. The way everyone had slowly learned that Allison would always clean up the mess. Now they were learning something different. I could still love them. I could still show up. I could still be generous. But I was no longer available for exploitation disguised as family. And that, I realized, was the strongest revenge I could have ever taken. That realization changed the way I looked at everything. I stopped measuring my relationships by how much I was willing to sacrifice. Instead, I started paying attention to something much simpler. How did I feel after being around these people? With Madison, things were slowly getting better. Not perfect, but real. She didn't ask me for money anymore. She didn't expect me to solve every inconvenience. When something went wrong, she tried to handle it herself before calling me. Sometimes she failed. Sometimes she called me anyway. But there was a difference now. She asked. She didn't assume. And that difference mattered. My relationship with Mom was more complicated. She was trying, but old habits don't disappear because someone has one good conversation. Every few weeks she'd slip back into the same language. Could you just? Maybe you could help. Madison is having a hard time. And every time, I calmly reminded her that Madison was responsible for her own decisions. Eventually Mom stopped arguing. Then something unexpected happened. She started asking about me. Not my money. Not Madison. Me. One evening she called and asked, Allison, what do you actually want? I was sitting on my porch when she asked. I looked out at the street. Nobody had ever asked me that question quite like that. I don't know, I admitted. And that was the truth. For years, I had been so busy responding to everyone else's needs that I had stopped thinking about my own. Mom said, then maybe you should figure it out. I laughed softly. Maybe I should. A few weeks later I made a decision. I had always wanted to take a long trip by myself. Nothing extravagant. Just somewhere quiet. A place where nobody knew me as Madison's sister or Mom's dependable daughter. Just Allison. So I booked it. 2 weeks. A small coastal town. No family obligations. No emergencies. No being someone's backup plan. When I told Mom, she surprised me. She didn't ask who would help Madison. She didn't tell me I was being selfish. She simply said, "I'm glad you're finally doing something for yourself." I almost cried. Because those words were so simple. But coming from her, they meant everything. Then I told Madison. She smiled. "You should go." "Really? Really?" She paused. "And don't let Mom guilt you into coming home early." I laughed. "I'll try." "You don't have to try." She looked at me seriously. "You've spent enough time worrying about everybody else." That was when I knew something had changed. Not just in me. In all of us. The trip itself wasn't dramatic. That was the point. I woke up when I wanted. Walked along the water. Read books. Ate dinner alone. Sat for hours without anyone needing anything from me. And somewhere during those 2 weeks, I realized how exhausted I had been. Not physically. Emotionally. I had spent years believing that being a good daughter meant being available. That being a good sister meant rescuing. That being generous meant never keeping score. But there is a difference between generosity and self-abandonment. I finally understood that. When I came home, Madison was waiting for me at the airport. She held up a small paper bag. "What's that?" "Something for you." Inside was a simple birthday card. She had written it herself. No long speech. Just a few lines. "I used to think you were strong because you always fixed everything. Now I understand you're strong because you finally learned you don't have to." I read it twice. Then I hugged her. Not because she was my responsibility. Not because she needed me. Because she was my sister. And for the first time, those two things felt completely different. Later that evening, Mom called. "How was your trip?" "Beautiful." "Did you enjoy being alone?" I smiled. "Yes." There was a pause. Then she said, "I'm proud of you." I closed my eyes. That sentence would have meant everything to the old Allison. To the woman who spent years trying to earn approval by giving more, fixing more, sacrificing more. But the new Allison heard it differently. I didn't need her pride to know I had made the right choice. So I was grateful to hear it. "Thank you, Mom." After we hung up, I walked into my bedroom. On the dresser was a photograph from my birthday. Everyone had been smiling. Madison was standing beside me. Mom was behind us. I looked at the picture for a long time. That night had changed my family. But it hadn't destroyed us. It had forced us to become something more honest. And as I put the photograph back down, I realized the revenge I had wanted at the beginning had disappeared completely. I didn't want Madison to hurt. I didn't want Mom to regret anything. I didn't want anyone begging for forgiveness. I wanted something much simpler. I wanted to live my life without feeling guilty for protecting it. And finally I was. I thought that was where everything would end. I was wrong. A few months later, my birthday came around again. I hadn't told anyone what I wanted. Honestly, I didn't even want a big celebration. After everything that had happened the year before, the idea of another birthday gathering made me nervous. But on the morning of my birthday, Madison showed up at my door. She was holding a small box. Behind her was Mom. I looked at both of them. "What are you doing here?" Madison smiled. "Can we come in?" I stepped aside. They walked into the living room. Mom looked nervous. That immediately made me suspicious. Madison placed the box on the table. "I want you to open this." I looked at her. "What is it?" "Just open it." I lifted the lid. Inside was a dress. For a moment I couldn't speak. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't expensive looking. It was simple, elegant, and exactly the kind of thing I would have chosen for myself. I touched the fabric. "Madison. I know it's not the same." I looked at her. "It isn't supposed to be." She took a breath. "Last year I destroyed something you were excited about because I was angry and jealous. Then I expected everyone to make you feel like you were the problem for being hurt." Mom's eyes dropped. Madison continued. "I can't undo that. But I can make sure I never treat you that way again." I looked at my mother. She stepped forward. "I owe you an apology too." I didn't say anything. She continued. I told you not to overreact because I was more concerned about keeping Madison comfortable than understanding what she had done to you. Her voice cracked slightly. I made you feel like your feelings were less important because you were the one who could handle it. I felt my eyes burn. For a long time, I had imagined what it would sound like if my mother finally understood. It wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting. No grand speech. Just the truth. And somehow that was enough. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote this because I knew I'd lose my nerve if I tried to say everything. I unfolded it. It was a list. Not of money. Not of things I had done for the family. It was a list of things she admired about me. My patience. My work ethic. My independence. My kindness. My ability to keep going. At the bottom she had written, "You should never have had to earn our love by being useful." That sentence broke something open inside me. I started crying. Madison came closer. She didn't try to tell me to stop. She didn't say I was overreacting. She simply hugged me. And for the first time I let myself cry without apologizing for it. Later that afternoon we went to a small restaurant together. No huge party. No expensive decorations. Just the three of us. Madison ordered dessert. Mom laughed. We talked about ordinary things. And for the first time in years nobody was asking me for anything. Nobody needed money. Nobody needed a favor. Nobody needed me to fix a problem. They simply wanted to be with me. Halfway through dinner, Madison raised her glass. To Allison. Mom smiled. To Allison. I laughed. To Allison. And then Madison said something that made all three of us quiet. Last year I thought your birthday dress was the thing I ruined. She looked at me. I was wrong. I waited. You were the thing I almost lost. I looked down at the table. That was the moment I understood what the past year had really been about. The dress had been worth $500. But the lesson had been worth far more. I had learned that people can love you and still take advantage of you. They can need you and still disrespect you. They can apologize and still need to earn your trust again. And you can forgive someone without giving them the same access they had before. When dinner ended, Madison insisted on paying her own share. I almost laughed. You don't have to prove anything. She smiled. I know. Then she added, I just want to. We walked outside together. The evening air was cool. Mom hugged me before getting into her car. Madison stood beside me. Happy birthday, Allison. I smiled. Thank you. As I watched them drive away, I realized something. For a long time I had thought revenge meant making the people who hurt me regret what they had done. I was wrong. The strongest revenge wasn't making Madison feel guilty. It wasn't making my mother apologize. It wasn't proving that I was right. It was becoming someone who no longer needed their approval to know her own worth. The girl who had once stood there holding the pieces of a $500 dress, wondering why everyone expected her to stay quiet, was gone. In her place was a woman who could say no without shaking. A woman who could forgive without forgetting. A woman who could love her family without abandoning herself. And when I finally understood that, the dress stopped being the thing I remembered most about that birthday. I remembered the woman I became because of it. If you've ever been the person everyone calls when something goes wrong, you probably understand Allison more than most people ever could. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't walking away from people who hurt you. It's learning that you can love them without carrying their responsibilities. Allison didn't get revenge by destroying her sister's life. She got it by taking back something much more valuable: her peace, her money, and her right to choose herself. So, if this story reminded you of someone in your own family, stay here. Subscribe to the channel because the next story may be about the boundary you've been afraid to set.